Hello, I'm Bill McCartney, and this is race 4 of the Heuer Challenge here on Port Phillip Bay. It's also the first major crunch point we've had in this series. Xerox can either wrap the whole thing up here today, or someone can mount a challenge. Warwick, can they do it?
Yeah, well, it's certainly up to Scott Ramsden or Rob Brown to take it away from Xerox. And it's going to be cruise and not boat speed that will determine this one, Bill.
Okay, they're out there jockeying for position now for race 4.
Keep it up, Cub!
On board with Bank of New Zealand, the voice of skipper Scott Ramsden. He has Xerox out to his right. 15 seconds. And Bank of New Zealand beautifully positioned here to squeeze Xerox at the start.
And Bank of New Zealand has squeezed Xerox straight out. He served one up to them very early in the piece, and Xerox will have to go behind Bank of New Zealand now. Prudential, just off to the left, is in clear air and will have good boat speed.
On board Bank of New Zealand, straight out of the blocks, and she has had a great start. So Scott Ramsden has got off to a tremendous start in the 4th heat of the Heuer Challenge. Skilled engineering forced to tack away to go out to the right-hand side of the course.
And we saw Bank of New Zealand there counting down to the start. It was a perfect start in as far as Xerox having to tack away now in dirty air from the Bank of New Zealand. But Scott Ramsden timed his run perfectly, had perfect boat speed and clear air. And back on board, Bank of New Zealand.
Down below them is the Prudential skiff. And at the moment, they seem very, very even in pace. Both crews working their boats, sailing as close as possible to directly into the wind, heading down towards the St Kilda shoreline. Currently, all sailing with the wind coming over their right-hand side in picture, except for Prima Drinks, now changing tacks to get out to the right-hand side of the course. To clear their air, they found themselves in the bad air behind Bank of New Zealand and Prudential.
Now, Bill, Bank of New Zealand has to watch out that they don't get squeezed out by Prudential there in the top of the screen. Prudential will try and force sail up a little bit higher and start to give Bank of New Zealand dirty air if they can.
Tip-top white high five out on the left, getting up underneath Bache with the green sails and doing very nicely early in this race. Bank of New Zealand very steady, beautifully sailed, the rig's working very nicely, nobody making much of a fuss on board, and still pacing it very well with Prudential. So at this early stage, looking as though very little between Bank of New Zealand and Prudential for boat speed. Coming back across now, Bache has changed direction, so has Tip-Top White High Five, and they cross just in behind Prudential and Bank of New Zealand, and I suspect we may have the top 4 right there at this point in time in the race, Warwick. Yes,
well, certainly the favoured side for this windward beat is the left, where all these boats are going. Now, Bache is starting to head out towards the right.
Bache, the subject of our viewer competition today. Keep an eye on the Bache. We want to know the name of the skipper of the Bache. We'll come back to you with a telephone number shortly for that 6-month skincare program from Bache. Back with that shortly. Meantime, Prudential changes directions, has gone as far down into St Kilda Bay as she can, now heading back out into the middle of the course. And giving us a little wave. This is where they start, down near St Kilda Pier, tack their way up to the top mark, then reach with the wind behind them to the wing mark, down to the bottom mark, up to the start-finish line. That constitutes 1 lap of 2 that they'll race today. And here comes Xerox across tacks with the lead skiffs.
So that start didn't help Xerox. They've got back in touch a little bit, but certainly having to go behind Bache, Tip-Top White High Five, and I believe will go behind Bank of New Zealand and Prudential. So that puts them in 5th position, and that's not good news for Phil Barnett.
Well, to win this Heuer Challenge, Phil Barnett has to do better than that. He basically has to beat Rob Brown, and as we see him now crossing in behind those lead skiffs, I think we'll find that at the moment he's somewhere around 12 seconds behind Prudential, and indeed also behind Bache, sailing a great race.
And while that 12 seconds isn't a lot as far as time goes, this is a very close encounter today, and there's 5 boats within that 12 seconds. So unless Xerox can get up there and beat Prudential, I think Prudential could take out this leg down here in Melbourne.
On board Bank of New Zealand, the crew beautifully trimmed. There they are going out to the right, beautifully trimmed, boat sailing very fast and very even between they and Prudential as to who leads this race, nothing in it at all. Now going for attack. straight after that tack, now the wind coming over their right-hand side, coming in from out over the right-hand side, we see Prudential cross ahead, which means Prudential leads and she tacks right on top of Bank of New Zealand here. And this is the match racing tactics that Rob Brown learnt during the America's Cup, serving him well once again. So Prudential, where she has to be to win the Tag Heuer Challenge and get back into the national circuit. Back with the racing and getting up now towards the top end of the course for the first time. Around about 30% of the way through this race, and Prudential leads narrowly from Bank of New Zealand.
Yes, it's very close to the top end, and Xerox seems to have done a little bit better up the second part of the windward beat, and has probably got into third place. Well, we can see them crossing in front of Bache there. Xerox has to tack again, in other words, turn around, and then turn around again, and Prudential tacking for the last time, and will lead around the top mark to set their spinnakers and head back down around the wing mark and then down to St Kilda Pier.
Well, that's very interesting what you say there, Warwick, but don't forget that these guys now have right of way. They're coming up with the wind across their right-hand side. Are they within range to assert their authority? Unfortunately for them, they're not. Prudential is going to round this top mark for the first time, a clear leader.
Yes, I think Xerox will probably slot in there in about third. Well, no, they've crossed in front of Bank of New Zealand, but Bank will round around the mark before them because they have to turn around again. On board Bank of New Zealand for the rounding mark the first time.
Go for it.
The spinnaker set.
Go for it, guys. Great set.
Cameron McDonald pulling the halyard up, the rope that pulls the spinnaker to the top of the mast, and Charlie Diekman pulling the rope out so the spinnaker goes to the end of the pole. And a fantastic set on board Bank of New Zealand.
What an absolute beauty. Now, that was sub 10 seconds, which is about as good as you can get with these...
Come on.
Oh, a bit of impatience there from Scotty.
Yep.
The boys getting themselves positioned, so Scotty Ramsden letting the boys know what he wants, and look how well they did there. In blue, down below Prudential now, they rounded some 8 seconds behind them, but now they've positioned themselves absolutely perfectly out to the right and have done extremely well.
Well, Scotty's just really pumped up there, Bill. He got a better set than Prudential and was able to sort of sneak up there, but we've got to remember they're down to leeward. And Xerox is out on the left, in other words, to windward, so it just depends on how tight this leg will be.
And of course, Scott Ramsden not out of contention in the Tag Heuer Challenge. It really comes down to the wire between Prudential, Xerox and Bank of New Zealand as to who is going to win this series down here in Melbourne. All three can win it. For Prudential to win it, they have to hold those current positions. If they finish first and Xerox second, then Prudential will win this series by 1 point.
Yes, and Xerox just starting to mount a challenge now on Rob Brown. And they're going to battle it out here. They've got to get out to the wing mark. Rob Brown will be wanting to squeeze out Xerox, keep the pressure on there, and the Bank of New Zealand will be wanting to get into the framework as well.
Well, it looks as though Prudential's done very well down here compared to Bank of New Zealand. Prudential out to the right here. They started dead even with the Bank. Perhaps Scotty had Bank even better position than that as they now go to change directions at the wing mark.
Come on, come on. Right, Cam.
Driving on Bank of New Zealand, turning around.
Let's go, Cam. Go, 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 go. Go, matey.
Jibes inside Prudential and they will take their air. Bank of New Zealand could go from second to first here in a moment, but Rob Brown will want to try and keep the pressure on and squeeze Bank of New Zealand out, as he's starting to do so now.
Very, very tight racing at the wing mark for the first time in this race. Now Skilled Engineering throws a jibe on top of Tip Top White High Five to try and steal their air. And all skiffs very much still in contention at this stage of this race. Probably not more than 20 seconds between the top 6.
Yeah, there's nothing in this, Bill. Nothing in it at all. And I tell you, one little mistake, and when they go to drop their spinnakers at the bottom end, positions could change.
On board Bank of New Zealand again. Scott Ramsden driving. Charlie Diekman in the bow. Cameron McDonald in the middle and doing a great job. But now Prudential starting to just ease away ever so slightly from Bank of New Zealand and Xerox. Xerox now in third position. And at the moment, she is being beaten in this series. She has to get up and pass Rob Brown if Phil Barnett is to take out the Tag Heuer Challenge. Our viewer competition today is focused on the Bache skiff, as we said. The number to ring is 0055 60562. The prize is a 6-month healthcare program from Bache, and the question is, tell us the name of the skipper of the Bache. Value of the prize is $500, $500 skincare program running for 6 months.
And getting towards the halfway point of the fourth race, we've got a battle royal developing between Prudential, Bank of New Zealand Xerox, Ella Bache and Tip Top White High Five. And Rob Brown is where he needs to be. That's at the front of the field. And dropping their spinnaker to complete lap 1. They've got about a 10-second gap over the rest of the field. A good drop, nice and clean. Banking New Zealand coming in and Xerox leaving it very late indeed. On board Banking New Zealand for the drop. Charlie Deakman stuffing that 1,000 square foot sail into the bag on the deck.
That's it, mate. Pull her in.
Coming up for the rounding. Nice clean drop.
And I must say that those boys make that manoeuvre look quite easy, but in actual fact, getting a spinnaker bag like that and keeping in trim as Bank of New Zealand now changes directions and starts going out to the right-hand side of the course, and Xerox following suit, but they make it look easy, Warwick, but in fact getting those spinnakers bagged and doing those tacks and those manoeuvres without dipping the wings and keeping the boat steady, a very difficult job.
It is a very difficult job, but you've got to remember that these guys are out on the water probably 120 times during the summer, and they would do that particular manoeuvre probably up around 1,000 times during the summer, so there's plenty of hours of practice.
Tip-top white high five, still right up there. Andrew Cuddy once again putting on a grand performance in this 2-year-old machine of his and really, really doing well. Ella Bache currently in 4th position, struggling a bit to stay with the leaders, but still doing very nicely. But the most important thing going on here again today is that Prudential is showing boat speed, better boat speed than she has all season. Prima Drinks on her way down to the bottom end of the course, just off the tail of the fleet, but still sailing nicely, a little bit underpowered with this number 2 rig and suffering from that factor.
Yeah, but up the front where the important boats are, it's Prudential and Banking New Zealand battling it out. And as you say, Bill, Prudential is showing good boat speed, and that's the first time for them, so Rob Brown will be a little bit happier.
Well, Scott Ramsden also going very nicely here today. Nothing between these two. I just can't pick the boat speed difference, which is making for some fantastically exciting racing. And of course, just at the moment where he sits at the moment, Rob Brown in Prudential is going to win this series. Xerox now crossing behind Bank of New Zealand, so still in 3rd position.
Did Brownie come up ahead of us then? Have a look, Charlie, come on.
Yes.
So we should get out there in the cruise, I reckon.
Tactics being discussed on board Banking New Zealand. Forward hand Charlie Deakman feeding information to the skipper, Scott Ramsden.
Okay, let's do it. You all right, Charlie?
Scotty's made his decision, and they're going to tack the boat. Here they go through the tack, and there's nothing in this. That's a good tack on board. And the guys are really working as a team today.
That was a great piece of work. We saw Prudential cross in front of them and tack right in front of them. So once again, this aggression from Rob Brown apparent all the time. He's never afraid to tack in front of the skiffs behind him and start giving them bad breeze. And that's what he's doing in the background of that previous picture at this very moment. Xerox now has got clear air away from Bank of New Zealand and Prudential. It may be that they're making a move.
Yes, well, Xerox is definitely doing their own thing. They don't want to get involved in the other people's battle. And on the course now, heading up towards the top mark for the last time, is the 3 boats there, Xerox, Prudential, Bank New Zealand, and there's nothing in it. One little mistake, as Xerox tacks, one little mistake and the positions could change dramatically.
So Phil Barnett changes directions to come back and make contact again with Prudential and Bank of New Zealand, but he's not making too much progress. The reason is that Rob Brown has found boat speed in Prudential at last, and we spoke to him earlier today about how they've achieved it.
Slammed the forward hand, worked up till early hours of the morning, recutting the number 2 rig, and that's just been a process over the last couple of weeks of getting the sails right, and for once this year we've had a bit of boat speed.
And well-deserved boat speed at that after all the work those boys have put in. They lead now by 10 to 12 seconds, and Prudential where she needs to be as we get up to 60% of the way through this race.
Well, here we go. Who's going to win the Tag Heuer Challenge? Will it be Prudential or will it be Xerox? Prudential rounds the mark with a slight margin over Banking New Zealand and Xerox, hoist their spinnaker to the top of the mast, and back on board Banking New Zealand. Guys running in.
Feed her out, Charlie.
Heuer going up, Spinnaker going up. Out to the end of the pole. And a good set on board bank.
Come on.
A little bit of a...
God.
Scotty Ramson feeling the pressure from Xerox. Pushing his guys to the limit.
Scotty really asking for everything from his crew and getting it. Xerox there started to look as though they were going to get away underneath them with a better set, but the boys on the bank were able to get the big sail up and now back in good shape, clinging to second position.
And the crews will be talking about what the breeze is doing, whether it's shifting, whether the breeze is coming up in velocity or dropping, because it's all important for those final downwind tactics. And this will take them to the finish. Xerox is starting to head out a little bit, trying to get fresher breeze and take the wind away from Bank New Zealand. And the Bank of New Zealand is trying to do exactly the same thing to Prudential. So there's plenty of pressure on board all of these boats right now.
Warwick, next week in Sydney, the Australian Championship will be sailed from the Sydney Flying Squadron on Sydney Harbour next week. Anybody in Sydney wanting to get out and see these machines getting around should make contact with the Sydney Flying Squadron in Sydney. Meantime, here on Port Phillip Bay.
It looks like Prudential's going for a jibe. There they go, running through, running from one wing to the other, and that's about as good as it gets, Bill.
On board Bank of New Zealand.
You right, Charlie?
Getting ready for the jibe. Charlie Diekman sprints across the wings.
On. Right, well done. Good job.
Scotty complimenting his crew on the work done there, and another very good piece of work by Charlie Diekman and Cameron McDonald. They've still got around about 15 seconds to make up on these people, and heading down now from the wing mark down to the bottom end of the course. They've only now got about 7 or 8 minutes to the finish of this race, and at the moment Rob Brown continuing his phenomenal comeback in this national circuit, looking as though he's going to take out the Tag Heuer challenge and therefore move up into equal footing with Xerox in the total circuit.
And the interesting thing is, Bill, that not only have they overtaken Xerox, but Xerox is down the back and really pushing it, trying to get past Bank New Zealand. So these three boats are so evenly matched. It's upon the crews and the tactics to decide which boat will come out on top.
Bank of New Zealand looking a picture, wind coming over their left-hand side, over their right-hand side. So from the top left-hand side of the picture is where the wind is coming from, and the skiff's just looking wonderful.
Yes, and the breeze is getting tighter here. The angle has changed a little bit, and Xerox elected to jibe, in other words, turn a little bit earlier than the bank, and now trying to mount a challenge and get across the top and take the wind away from Bank New Zealand.
Now, that earlier picture told a bit of a fib about the distance. It's just that the lens closes the distance right up. You can see from the high shot in a moment that Xerox actually has fallen off the pace a little bit. Now dropping the spinnakers at the bottom end of the course.
This is it. This is a final drop.
Come on, Nod.
Bank New Zealand pulled right up on Prudential, and the bank went for a pretty early drop there. That surprised me.
Now out behind these skiffs we see Xerox still coming with spinnaker. Xerox still coming with spinnaker, leaving it very late indeed.
Oh, I think, here we go. Look, they're leaving it to the last moment. This is unbelievable. They're going to get Bank New Zealand right on the mark.
Come on. Slow it up. What happened then?
And Scott Ramsden expressing his frustration in a phenomenal drop. Dave Ewings does the best drop you've just about ever seen on an 18-foot skiff. Left it until he had about 9 seconds and got it down.
But I just can't believe Bank New Zealand, they had a chance to win this race and they just took a conservative role. They had a chance to win it and they just threw it away.
Too late with the drop?
Too early, dropped it too early.
Tack now. You right, Nod?
Scotty's still trying to get back into it. At the moment, Xerox second. Prudential seems to have the race in the bag.
Jib on hard. Come on. Main on, Cam. All rightio. That's what I'm asking.
A lot of tension on board.
And Prudential indeed sails a virtually perfect race. She's coming up to the finish line now. And she's through, and Prudential wins the Tag Heuer Challenge. Phenomenal continuation of the comeback by Rob Brown. A 1-point victory over the ever-present Xerox brings Rob Brown and the Prudential team back into contention in this series. Excellent performance also in this series by Tip Top White High Five. In the national circuit, progress totals. Phil Barnett still in charge on Xerox. Prudential mounting a challenge. Bank of New Zealand still right there. that was some of the best and tightest racing I've ever seen the 18-foot skiffs put on. When we resume in Sydney, we'll see whether or not Prudential can sustain its charge.